Hi, everybody. Welcome to Small Steps, Big Life, where I have conversations with people who are just doing amazing things in the world, and they're doing them one small step at a time. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, actually a little south of Vancouver, Canada, in a charming little town called White Rock, right by the ocean. I can see the U.S. from where I live. And about 45 minutes to an hour north of me is my guest today, Cresswell Walker, live from his sailboat, which will be the center of today's story and adventure that Chris has enjoyed with his wife. And let's get right to it. Welcome, dear man. Thank you for saying yes to having this conversation.
My pleasure, Nathan. I'm really pleased to be here and really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. Let me say one more thing. The way that I met Cress was last Saturday. I'm a member of CAPS, which is the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, as is Cress, and he did a presentation on Saturday, which was lovely. And after hearing the presentation, I thought, I have to have this man on my show. So here he is. He was kind enough to say yes. And we went through several technical hoops to get here. And I'm happy that we did. We've been getting to know each other along the way, so that's great. So, Chris, you're a speaker now, and you had this amazing experience on your sailboat. Why don't we start, as you did in your talk? Let's give people a sense of your adventure with the sea, how that all started, and yeah, let's just take people back before we get into the juicy bit, the main bit.
I had the most unlikely start sailing with the sea because I grew up in a household in central Canada in southeastern Ontario with parents that didn't care or know about sailing, but quite unaccountably, I liked sailing, and so I was the unidentified kid running around the yacht club. Nobody knew who I belonged to, and as long as nobody stopped me short to actually ask,
wow.
I'm sticking away with quite a bit of time at the Royal Hamilton Yacht Club when I was just in elementary school. So I just couldn't not get involved with sailing. My first job as a city planner, I'm working in Whistler, and instead of buying property, I'm building a boat.
Just doing it all wrong. Got to do what you got to do. Yep.
So it's sort of been a lifelong interest, and it culminated a little over 10 years ago, where my wife Irene and I we actually tried to buy an airplane because I also love to fly, and we had a handshake deal, and the deal fell through. And then we looked at one another and says, "Well, that's not meant to be. Let's buy a boat." So we bought a boat. We bought a boat that we thought, if we're going to buy a boat, might as well buy a boat we could go somewhere in. So we bought an old offshore boat. Interestingly, we bought it from a gentleman who had passed away, who was preparing the boat to sail to the South Pacific. It was his lifelong dream.
Wow.
And he died suddenly and tragically of a heart attack, and left behind the boat. And we bought it, and Peter was his name, and we honored Peter sailing across the equator some years later.
Wow.
Thanks to Peter and all his efforts, which we lived with on the boat.
So before we get into that, tell me what happened to the boat you were building in Whistler. Did it ever get finished?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was a Dash 34. We built from a Holland deck kit, and I had a boat partner called Clark, dear longtime friend. We built it in the summer under a carport in Alpine Meadows.
Wow.
And shoved it into a snowbank for the winter. And in the spring, we had a boat mover come in and take it down to Vancouver, and we put a keel on crookedly first time, and put a mast in the boat, and shoved it in the water, and we spent 5 glorious years racing and cruising and all around the Pacific Northwest. It was a wonderful experience.
Wonderful. So that's where
more fun than him in Whistler.
Yes, indeed it is. So was that your first, before you had built that boat, had you amassed? Well, yeah, I would like you to tell people, please, about your experience of being hired as a part of that crew. That's the first thing I remember you sharing on Saturday was
Sailing across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Well, I was a university student and working in Toronto with the Department of Regional Economic Expansion as a co-op student.
Mm-hmm.
And where would I spend my evenings but on my bicycle riding around the waterfront?
Mm-hmm.
And I had barged my way into the National Yacht Club, which is kind of my way. And I was standing oogling this very nice racing boat. And as I stood there, along came the crew, and they were going out for a practice sail. They were apparently a pretty keen racing bunch. And I'm standing on the dock with my hands in my pocket, leaning against my bicycle, chatting them all up, hoping that they will invite me to go sailing.
Wow.
But they untied the lines from the dock and started the engine and started away from the dock, and I thought that's it for me. But a gust of wind came along and forced the boat back up against the dock. So
Wow.
I dropped my bicycle and I pushed on the boat, and I'm running down the dock, pushing the boat off the dock till we got to the end of the finger, and the guy on the side deck stuck his hand down and says, "Well, are you coming?"
Wow. Great story.
So I dropped the bike and came on board, and
Wow.
it turned out to be the community syndicate-run boat called Magistry. She was being prepared to sail to England for the 1979 Fastnet
Wow.
and Admiral's Cup races, and they were looking for a delivery crew. So I put my hand up again, and away we went. So we went across Lake Ontario to the Erie Barge Canal. I took the mast down and motored down the canal to New York City, and then took the mast back up.
Mm-hmm.
And off we went, 28 days going bumpity bump across the sea to England.
Wow. And if you would please, because I think it's such an important part of the story, you talked about your relationship with fear, how it changed on that trip.
Well, it was my first offshore passage. I was this young man, crazy about sailing, but never been offshore before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was why I volunteered to make a trip. So as we headed off to New York City, that first day, we were all drinking and smoking like young men do. And we were partying, and my watch ended, and I went tottering off below to my berth about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Next thing I know, somebody's rattling my shoulder saying, "Get up, it's your watch." So staggered out of my berth, put on my foul weather gear and boots. I'm hopping around on the boat, trying not to throw up and trying not to lose my balance because the boat's jumping all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally made it up on deck, and I looked all around the horizon, 360 degrees, nothing but nothing. Blackness in every direction.
Yeah.
And I realized that what I'd gotten myself into, here I was going to sail 2,800 miles in this 42-foot boat with 6 strangers. And, you can make up a lot of stories about all the things that'll happen in 28 days sailing across the ocean. So I was very afraid.
Mm-hmm. And
well, I mean, obviously we made it, but it was one event after another. The first thing that happened was we struck a log in the dark of the night and broke off the speed indicator, which was not that serious, but it made a pretty big crash bang. And I thought, oh my God, here it is. I'm going to die, just like I thought. The boat's going to sink, and it'll be the end. And I was very afraid again. And but I didn't die, and the boat didn't sink, and we kept going. And then a couple of days later, I went below and dropped down into water up to my knees, and the boat was actually sinking. And I got very afraid again. And well, it was the toilet. It was backing up into the boat, and water was back flowing and filling the boat up. So we shut off the head and bailed out the boat and sailed onward. A couple of days later, one of the wires that holds up the mast popped, and the mast threatened to come down. I got afraid again, and the mast didn't fall down, and we kept going. And a couple of days later, another shroud went pop. Fixed that and carried on. And eventually, the episodes of fear became less intense and less frequent.
Mm-hmm.
But one morning, just about a week out of England, early morning watch, the sun is coming up, and the sky is dark and heavy with this very flat bottom storm cloud coming across the horizon from the east. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, it's going to blow like hell. It's going to be really nasty out here in a few hours. And but boy, it's very pretty.
Yeah.
And around about then, I realized that I really stopped being afraid of being afraid. And that was quite a revolution, because I realized that, and no longer being afraid of being afraid, then my life opened up quite significantly. I learned that if I was prepared to put up with the discomfort of being afraid, I could do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I really wanted you to share that, because I remember when I heard that on Saturday thinking, what a powerful thing. How many of us will do that? Will allow ourselves to be in that moment again and again, have the opportunity to be consciously in fear again and again as you were, until we're able to make that choice. Very inspiring.
I'm not a brave man. I'm no different than anybody else.
Yeah.
I think that what took me into that was my passion for sailing.
Yeah.
I put up with seasickness and fear and not ever having any money or never getting a condo in Whistler.
Yeah.
Because I love to sail.
Yeah.
So that passion took me into that learning.
Yeah.
I think I would have signed up for it otherwise.
Yeah. I just want to put in a 15-second side note here. When you got to the part of the story on Saturday, and again this time when you talked about coming up on deck and all you could see was blackness all around, I wanted to share with you a small little experience that I had, which was completely the opposite. In the summer of '95, I worked 1 4-month stint on a cruise ship. I wanted to have the experience, some similarities to what you experienced, of course, and many, many differences. But the one image that I wanted to share with you, because it was so significant to me, was the first morning I came up on deck in the middle of the Mediterranean, far enough away from shore that I couldn't see land in any direction. And for me, and it was a glorious summer day. And for me, it was my favorite. To this day, it's my favorite image of sea touching sky, infinite possibility, no restrictions in any direction. Just gave me such peace and joy to have that image. So I'm sure you had a million of those.
It's the perpetual nature of being offshore sailors to live in that place. It's so open, it's so vast, it's so natural.
Yeah.
It is a huge wilderness.
Yeah.
Much bigger than the wilderness we have on land.
Yeah.
So you can't help but be kind of enchanted by the majesty.
Yeah. Okay, so you come back from that experience. You've had this great insight about fear. So, what was the time? How much time elapsed between that experience and you buying this boat and going on the adventure with Irene?
Well, I was in my early 20s, 21, 22,
Okay.
and I was.
Okay.
And we left to sail the boat to Australia.
Okay, so you had many, many sailing experiences of all shapes and kinds in between those two moments, right? So here's a question that I'd like to ask: Who encouraged, who helped to nurture that passion in you? Did you have mentors? Did you take lessons? Like, how did your passion unfold? How did it really find its legs, its sea legs? Pardon the pun.
Well, there's sort of two pieces to that.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is my parents,
Mm-hmm.
my father, most memorably.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one day he was a high school teacher, history teacher, came home from school one day, took me upstairs to my room and said, "I've got something for you." And he pulls out a world map and he pins it to the wall right beside my bed. And this map is like 6, 7 feet wide
Wow.
and 5 or 6 feet high. It's a huge map of the world, and it's like right there where I I see it every morning and see it every night. And I used to stare at this map and think about, well, here's this little dot where we live in
Yeah.
Ontario, and here's this other land called Africa and Europe and Australia. I think interested me the most because he said that even though it looks to you like they're on the other side of the globe and upside down, they're actually not. And I wondered, how could that be? I got to see that for myself. So that was really a genesis in being interested in travel,
Mm-hmm.
of which sailing is such a part offshoot.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, that despite what I said about my parents not having anything to do with sailing, we had a canoe. We grew up with a family canoe, and my father took us all out and about anytime we could. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was given all freedom in the world to take the canoe and explore on my own, which I did from a very young age. Would be up before dawn and fishing rod and head out on the lake and lose a bunch of lures, catch the odd fish, and then did canoe trips as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was part of it. So there's that urge to travel, explore, and that natural affinity for the water, I guess, that came
Yeah.
out of the canoeing.
I have to ask you, did you ever enjoy any time in Algonquin Park?
Oh
Yeah.
yes, went to a YMCA camp for 2 years, and both those years we did 2 week canoe
Yeah.
trips. Big trout, little
Yeah.
trout, otter slides.
Yeah. I just had to mention that
You
because,
too.
well, I'm from Montreal, and for those
Huh?
people who are watching or listening who don't know, it's basically it's 1,000 square miles, I think, or miles or kilometers north of Toronto. Big park, beautiful park. And I had a very, very good friend in Montreal who was interested in his own fun, unique way, interested in increasing consciousness, awareness, connection to nature, with the world. And so one of the things that he would do is he would lead week-long canoe trips in Algonquin Park. And I went on many of those, and it changed my life, completely changed my life. So,
It's very similar to offshore sailing in lots of
hmm,
ways.
just
More
yeah, just the magnitude of it is different. Yeah. Anyway, so I just had to ask you about that. So your dad, your mom, and anyway, did you take? I mean, I don't know what a lifetime of sailing passion looks like. Are there teachers involved? Are you part of several crews? Like, how do you nurture that passion?
well, I'm 17 years old, and we've got the sailing club. So I thought, well, I'll put an ad in Sail magazine,
Right.
and I'll put this ad in. And those were the days, of course, with a classified ad. It had to be like 2 or 3 months before the magazine came
Yeah.
out. So I put it. It said, "Young man seeks crew position for the summer."
Great.
So I put that in and it went out into the universe, and then got a little letter in the mail, and it turned out to be a gentleman from New York City. He had a yacht, and he hired a boat boy every summer to come and look after the boat. So I emailed him back, and we had a phone call, and he said, "Come on down, and we'll meet you, and see if we like one another, and if we do, you can be my boat boy." So I guess I passed the interview, and 2 or 3 months later, I'm on the train down to New York City, and he picks me and takes me off to the Park Avenue penthouse, and then
Wow.
we get in the car, we drive out to his Japanese villa in Darien, Connecticut, and he takes me off and shows me the boat and his family, and gives me a car to drive, which turned out to be a 1852 T-bird coupe.
Whoa.
He says, well, it burns a bit of oil, but I guess it'll do.
Nice.
So I cruised around Darien, Connecticut all summer picking up girls and trying to get up in the morning to take them sailing. But the owner was Howard A. Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
He had actually been a very young captain of a minesweeper in the Second World War.
Wow.
And he had actually had the ship go down underneath him, and
Hmm.
he had stories of being in the water for 8 hours waiting to be picked up, and his men being taken one by one by the sharks.
Yes.
So he had done a lot of soul searching and becoming as a result of that sort of experience. So he was, I mean, that sort of experience would either wed you to the sea or kill your interest in being anywhere near it forever. And in his case, it was clearly the former.
Wow.
And he turned out to be a very able seaman and mature and wise man. And so he became my sailing mentor.
Wow.
With Howard, another story with Howard? I can
Please.
tell you a story. Howard invited, we went off racing, which he'd like to do. Howard would be in his 70s, I think. So he would invite me and my friends, young guys, to come and pull ropes for him, and off we would go. And we weren't very experienced sailors, but we were young and good company, and Howard liked being around us. So we went off in this race, Nantucket Sound. It's blowing 35, 40 knots. It's really howling. And we're racing away downwind in this big, heavy steel looters yawl, spinnaker up, going like hell, miles ahead of the rest of the fleet. And we get down to the leeward mark, the downward mark, and it's a jibe mark that sailors out there. And what sailors know is that it's the most difficult turn in the world in heavy weather downwind to sail from one point of sail to turn the other way, where the boom has to swing across the boat. Because it needs to come across in a controlled way. If it isn't controlled enough, you could break something. And if it's too controlled, it could spin the boat around. So there's this 12-foot structural buoy that we've got to jibe around the port. We're all bracing for the turn, getting ready. Everybody's at their stations, and we come down to this buoy, which is, you can imagine, in 35 knots of breeze, the buoy is bouncing and rolling in the sea wave. We got a little too close. We turned into the jibe. The boom slammed across and jammed. And the wind caught it, and it spun the boat around. And there we are, dead in the water, head to wind, side by side with this 12-foot structural buoy going up and down in the water beside us. No steerage, no way to get out of there. So now what? And Howard yelled some instructions. We pulled a few ropes, and we managed to kind of get away from it. And we came, and the thing that had happened when we got too close to the buoy is it ripped the main sheet off the end of the boom. So we have this uncontrolled mainsail going, just luffing and making a huge racket. The boom is doing these sweeps through the cockpit. And Howard's, quite cool and quite composed about the whole thing. And we're all sort of in a state of panic, and we're following his instructions. And then there's this sort of zipper-like sound as every sail slide from the bottom of the sail to the top of the mast rips off the mast.
Oh, God.
It just goes to the very top. Wow. And now we've only got this mainsail that's only held on the boat with the main sheet at the masthead. And it's now doing this dive bombing through the cockpit. It goes, it's all right, we'll get it under control. And we're struggling, and then the boom swings up into the air and jacks itself about 30 feet off the deck onto the backstay.
Good Lord.
And Howard looks up and goes, now we're
Oh, boy.
So
Oh dear.
I don't remember actually how we ever got the thing down, but we did. We had to retire from the race, which just annoyed the shit out of
Hmm.
Howard because we were so far in front, he thought we were going to win for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was quite a gentleman and quite a mentor.
Hmm. Fantastic. Well, any other steps that you want to
So
share
it was a
between?
natural for me going
Sorry,
sailing after that.
I didn't hear that.
With his mentoring,
Hmm.
he set such an example as a seaman that stayed with my whole life, and
Hmm.
it's really stood me in good
And
stead.
so, just over 10 years ago, the plane doesn't happen. So you and Irene say, let's buy the boat and let's make it a boat we can travel in. And
Well, the boat comes out of the water, and we go to work on it. Finally, get it
mhm,
back in the water, and we have a plan. 3.5 years, we'll have enough money saved up, and we'll have the boat paid for and money saved, and we'll go sailing somewhere. And after about a year, we went 2 years. We went out here in 2 years, and then 6 months later, we're going. 6 months, we're going next
mhm.
year. We're going May 1st. So uh, we did my 50th birthday. We had two friends come on board with us, and we sailed out of Vancouver, 2005, out across wandered through the strait
And your
and
plan
sailed.
was, and your initial plan was to go where?
Well, it had always been my fancy, as you
Right.
know now, to sail to Australia. So that was the plan. We had the boat. It was a good offshore boat, paid for, and we had $11,000 in the bank, and we knew that would pay for food and beer and other things, and get us as far as Australia. And we would just figure out
Right.
what was next when we got there.
Hmm.
And we did get there. 9 months later, we had a magical trip across down the coast of North America to California, and then our longest offshore leg that whole trip, really, all the way to the Marquesas from Dana Point, California. It took us
Hmm.
almost 30 days, a month, riding in the wilds of Hiva Oa, volcanic tropical island with the huge cliffs and the towering mountains in the background, and the jungle kind of flowing all over the sides into the sea, and birds soaring in the air, and a huge trade wind sea crashing against the rock
Yeah.
face. Just
You must,
beautiful.
yeah, you must have just been
Wild, wild.
beyond ecstasy. Just to be living your dream and be in that environment. And,
Yeah, it was when we made that landfall, our first landfall ever. I mean, you have to know that you get out there and you sail every day, more or less in the same
yeah.
direction, following your compass, and you think you know where you are because you've got your GPS and you're watching your GPS every day, and so you think you're there when you think you're there, but you
Right.
don't actually know until you see it. So we came within striking range around nighttime, so we hove to, which is to say we stopped the boat as
Yeah.
much as you can stop the boat from sailing. And because we didn't
Yeah.
want to make a landfall in the dark. It was a very difficult harbor and lee
Yeah.
shore and all that stuff. So I'm sitting there sort of thinking about my life and how amazing it is. I'm alone on deck. Irene's off watch below sleeping. And I thought, I bet if I go below and turn on the
Oh,
radar, I might just pick up the image of the island on the radar. And the feeling was sitting there watching the little green arc go around and around, and then seeing those little dots show up of the cliffs some 20 miles away, nautical miles away. It was like, oh my God, we've actually done it. And then the next morning, when the sun came up on those mountains and the cliff facing, just
wow.
amazing. We'd done it. And And the most powerful thing about that experience was that the proof of our success made a lie of my own self-story that I wasn't capable.
Mm.
That core level belief that I'm just not adequate to whatever life, living, working, all that core stuff. But there we were, South Pacific. We made the landfall. We sailed all those ways. Amazing experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it didn't stop there.
No, well, yeah. So we, it was funny. We sailed into the harbor and went, oh, there's a bunch of other sailboats in here. They've all done the same thing we've done. We're not so special after all. But as it turned out, we over the ensuing 6 months sailing across all the islands across the South Pacific, we would see these people again and again, and they all became friends. Speak to them on the radio, on watch at sea, and in harbors. We would go out and chase around, taking in the sights, and drink too much beer too late, telling too many stories, and so they became fast friends. And they were and are a very interesting community of people who come from most of the Western countries of the world, in every conceivable background. They're wonderful people. So they became our community. And we sailed out of the Marquesas and onward to the Tuamotus, which is part of French Polynesia as well, and then onto Tahiti, which is not so great for sailing, but then onto the rest of the Windward and Leeward Islands to Aha and Bora Bora and Mopilia, and all the just beautiful tropical paradisical places one after the other. And then the Cook Islands, Palmerston, and onto Niue and Tonga, and then south to New Zealand, because you had to get out of the cyclone belt before cyclone season began. So you sailed south out of the trade winds and into the cyclonic wind systems of the Tasman Sea, the dreaded Tasman Sea. And ended up in New Zealand just before Christmas, and we did some tour. We didn't sail much around New Zealand. We hired a car and did a north-south tour of the two islands, and then sailed to Australia, arriving early in the new year.
So 9 months later, you said 8 or 9 months later, from Vancouver.
Yeah. So we didn't have any money left, and our choices were really we get on an airplane and fly home, sell a boat in Australia, or let's see if we can find something to do here in Asia. So there's a new theme that arises here. I'd always been a traveler, spending summers hitchhiking and into Europe and Asia, traveling overland. So I love to travel, and I always kind of fancied working in Southeast Asia, what that would be like to actually live and work in a foreign culture. I thought that would be pretty interesting. So that's what we did. And I had a friend who hired me as a community liaison officer for a gold mine in the jungles of the Philippines. So I flew from Australia to the Philippines, and I was off in this camp, and pretty soon the NPA, the National Philippine Army, was engaged in the PLA, the Philippine Liberation Army. The rockets were going one way, and the body bags and helicopters were going the other way, and it's just a bit too hot. And I was often the only white guy in the camp, and I felt kind of vulnerable that I might be taken hostage or something ridiculous like that, because there were guards in the camp, but the guy come down the trail with an M16, poking his ribs and say, "Come with us." So I bailed before that happened.
Yeah.
And by then, Irene had found work in Thailand, in Bangkok, and soon got transferred to Singapore. So I joined her there, and that's where we kind of settled in there. And went to work. I started a business doing coaching and training, speaking and skippering, and Irene was working in my IT business.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very good, in Singapore.
Now, how long did you and Irene spend apart between when you were, Australia, okay, we need to figure this out, you going to the Philippines, her going to Singapore, you getting reunited? How long was all that?
It'll be about 3 months, I guess.
Wow. And how did that feel to be apart that long and in two different, never mind countries, two completely different experiences too?
Yeah, especially with no cell phone coverage in the jungle.
Exactly.
It was hard. It was really hard because you're pretty connected after sailing all that way together. It was quite an intense experience for us as a couple to do that together. It's such a partnership. So to suddenly be off in different lives, not having a chance to really stay connected, that was difficult.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. I remember you talking about that on Saturday when, when you're sailing, sailing is something that you're doing 24/7. And so, it's partnership was the word you used to describe your connection to Irene, and how when you give someone the watch, it's one of the most powerful opportunities to trust. You really have to know that the other person has everything well in hand while you get the little sleep that you can before you switch roles. And I just thought it was a powerful statement you made about your relationship. So I can well imagine in that intensity. Well imagine. I haven't experienced it, and I don't mean to say that I can just assume it. But to go from that to being separated to the other extreme, not even being able to speak to each other regularly. It's been very difficult. So anyway, so you get back together again finally in Singapore, and a whole other chapter starts.
Yeah, quite a journey creating a business in a foreign land and a foreign culture. Singapore was very welcoming as a place to open a business. They're very business friendly, so it was easy to incorporate and get status there and get started. A big expat community, which helps too. But still, I had to navigate the cultural differences. Coaching and corporate training, coaching in particular, was still pretty new in Asia, and working as a corporate trainer, I had to adapt how I did my work to the culture, which first I had to understand, and that took a long time. That was really very, very interesting, especially when you're creating a business where you need to establish credibility and be credible and attractive to people you want to hire you as a consultant or a coach, and you don't even understand the culture.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning. The Chinese culture, they're very welcoming and very open and hospitable. Like to meet you, come on down, we'll have tea, we'll have a conversation. And yes, of course we'll do business, and you go away and nothing happens. So you let the appropriate amount of time pass, and you make contact again. Oh yes, come and have tea, and we'll visit. And, yes, of course we'll do business and have a lovely time together, and you go away and nothing happens. And so it goes for some period of time until they feel that they know you well enough to start to do business with you. I've been doing any work with them. It's not about work credibility. It's about sort of that person getting to know you. And I've since learned from working in China why it is that way. So that was an interesting one.
And so I'm thinking now back to your experience of, the crossing over to crossing the Atlantic, and you learning to not be afraid of fear. Did you find that learning, was applicable in this experience when you're in a new culture and just feeling so afraid. The possibility of being afraid, it seems, is around every corner in every experience. Did you remember that? Did you draw on that insight in that experience? And
I did. There was an interesting thing going on. So I had created an image, a brand, business cards. I was holding events, giving talks, free workshops, filling the room with people, meeting lots of people, having a really nice time. But I wasn't closing. I wasn't landing customers. And what I realized was that at some level, I didn't think I was worthy to ask. So I was unconsciously subverting a business outcome. I was going through the motion, but at some energetic, emotional level, I was not allowing it to happen.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time working with some of my own tools that I work as a coach on myself. One of them is a tool, EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, which is a great way of releasing stuck energies and emotional structures that are sort of deep within our psyche.
Yep.
And I worked away on that. And I just kept going back. So it was fearful in a more subtle way to sort of keep bringing myself back into that learning and the disappointment and to keep going until things started to flow away. So that was really very interesting. Yeah.
I'm smiling at
a different kind of life.
Yeah. I'm smiling as I'm getting to know you, Chris, because there's one more similarity. I'm a huge fan of EFT. I've been in it in a major way for about the last year, and it's changed my life. In fact, one of my guests 2 weeks ago is one of the 29 people who were personally trained by Gary Craig, Andy Bryce. And I'm just laughing at all the parallels that I'm experiencing with you as we go along. It's fun.
I saw you nodding your head. I could see that you knew.
Very much so. Yeah. So Singapore, the adventure in Singapore lasted for how long?
We were in Singapore 5 years, and during that time, I started working as a paid yacht skipper on a 90-foot trimaran, which was huge fun, basically a party boat. And we sold our first boat because we were not happy with its sailing capability. And Irene gets the credit. She wanted a bigger boat. She wanted a boat that was big enough for children and grandchildren and friends to come and sail with us. So we bought a bigger boat, and we bought it in San Francisco. So I went back there and I sailed across the South Pacific a second time with a bigger boat, and made it eventually to Singapore and Thailand. And we took it into Thailand and up a creek into a fish boat yard, miles away from tourist land. And we did a total refit. And that's the boat that we sailed onward from Singapore. After about year 4, we were thinking, it's work. Singapore is all about work. It's time to go. And it took us a year and a half to get out of town.
Right.
We did eventually. So we sailed out and spent 7-8 months just cruising around Southeast Asia, places we hadn't seen. We got around to Malaysia and Thailand and out to Borneo and the Philippines and Vietnam, Cambodia, Bali. We spent a lot of time in Bali. We didn't like Bali. Then we left. We sailed out through Krakatawa and then to Kokoskiling, south of Indonesia. And we made our way across the South Indian Ocean to Mauritius and Rodriguez and Reunion, and then on to South Africa. And in South Africa, we thought we would try to do what we did in Singapore in South Africa. But we found very quickly that we just couldn't make a go of it there. We felt Africa was a beautiful, magical, spiritual land, but it is so fraught with cultural, political, and economic issues that it just wasn't viable as a place to live and work. So we, after 4 months, we untied the lines and sailed regrettably from South Africa and sailed all the way up from South Atlantic Ocean into the North Atlantic to the Azores, a long and very difficult upwind passage. We were 21 days sailing upwind. Every time I say that, all the sailors in the room groan. In total appreciation, it just was exhausting work. But we had a boat that would do that, and we learned not to push it too hard. But still, long, hard passage. So we arrived in the Azores, and then we spent a glorious summer. Our plan was to work in either the Middle East or Europe. And so we'd been sort of prospecting for work as we sailed, and Irene had a lead on a job in Qatar, and that didn't come to be in the spring. So we thought, well, we're here, we might as well sail across the Mediterranean. So we made our way Portugal and Spain and France, through Greece, and we ended up in Turkey.
Yeah. And how long were you in Turkey?
2 years. Yeah. Irene got a job there. She was working doing medical imaging work, implementation there for a company called Orion. And I poked around looking for work as a coach in Istanbul, but
the darndest thing.
Speak Turkish. The darndest thing.
Yeah.
I don't speak much Turkish. They don't speak much English, so it was very difficult. So I ended up going back to Singapore and then doing some work in China. So I was working with clients going back and forth between seeing Irene in Istanbul and working with Southeastern clients in Singapore and in and out of Beijing for that 2 years. So we had kind of a jet setter working, traveling, exhausting lifestyle. But we had lots of time to cruise Turkey and Greece while we were there, and I think it's the most accessible cruising on the planet. It's beautiful weather, beautiful water, nice people, a little pricey by Asian standards, but yeah. So we did that for 2 years, and then we thought, well, we'll go home. So in October, we cast off the lines in Turkey and sailed back out through the Mediterranean, down the Moroccan coast to the Canary Islands, and then across the South Atlantic, and then to the Caribbean, through the Caribbean and island chain, and then to the Dutch ABC Islands, San Blas and Panama, through the Panama Canal, which was quite a lovely experience. I like that. And then out to the Galapagos. Our longest passage ever, 4,000 nautical miles from Galapagos to Hawaii. And left the boat there, and I went off to work in China, and Irene came to spend time with her children. And then we met just August last year, and sailed the worst hurricane season ever in the North Pacific. And we left in the middle of it to sail across to Vancouver from Hawaii, being chased all the way by Hurricane Ignacio, which eventually caught us. But by then it had pretty much blown itself out.
And so when did you get back to Vancouver?
So we sailed in the north end of Vancouver Island Port Hardy.
And how did that feel?
We were.
How did it feel to get back to Port Hardy?
Sorry. Well, gee, no, the Pacific Coast is really beautiful. The north end of Vancouver Island and coming down the Inside Passage, it's just very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing coming home, you expect it to be the way you remember it, and the landscape is, but not. And everything that was, as we remember it, is no more. So the experience is kind of bittersweet, I think. It's wonderful to be back in a beautiful part of the world, and it's so much fun to catch up with friends and reconnect. And it's a relight. It's about recreating a new life now, that cruising life, for now at least, is finished.
And so, I don't know how to ask this question. How's your wanderlust? Maybe that's the best way to ask it. Do you feel good about being where you are? And
yeah, it's a great way to ask it. My wanderlust is always about finding something of heart that is engaging, and for me that means it's new, it's challenging, it holds opportunity for growing up some more, doing some more learning. So I'm in that place between the end of one journey and adventure and the beginning of the next. So my first emotional response is to be impatient, and my more practiced thoughtful is to be prepared to surrender and wait and look at the same time. It's the old story of kind of holding on and letting go at the same time. I need to be engaged in exploring and trying different things, and looking for the next thing to embark on. Because as you in your work so brilliantly surmise, it's not about big choices, it's not about big things. It's about lining up small choices until they turn into something.
And that, from what I know of your story, your 10-year, it was 10 years, right, between when you left and when you returned?
10 years almost to the...
So that's really what I see as being the thread throughout the story, exactly what you just said, that combination of surrendering and being open to what's next, and just constantly, being open, being mindful. A combination of what?
Continuing to explore different things.
Yeah. So you're...
And
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, there's a big impatience in me that says, I want to make it big and as much fun as the last 10 years. And that's not surrender.
Interesting. I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah. It'll be what it'll be.
Yeah.
We just have to get on with it.
And so for the time being, you've decided to do the work you were doing. I assume you were a coach and speaker in Canada before you were doing it in Singapore.
Yes, I was fairly new as a coach and a speaker and a trainer. I learned an awful lot working 10 years overseas. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm coaching and I'm speaking and looking for some training work. But it's slow. Vancouver's a competitive marketplace. A lot of people here with a lot of talent, very skillful. Our economy here is by Asian standards, it's pretty slow moving. So, and you know, been there, done that.
Right.
So there'll probably be something new.
That's what I'm hearing. Well, that's, you know, so that's why I was asking you what it was like to come back, is I'm sure there's that, as you're talking about that juxtaposition of home, familiarity, reconnecting with friends and family, and you're not the same person. There's been literally a whole world's worth of experience that you have now assimilated into you, and you just can't look at anything the same way. So, yeah, maybe the next jaunt won't be 10 years long, but I have no doubt that there will be more adventures. Of this, I'm absolutely certain. So, yeah.
I think so. I mean, our Irene too. Both of our context is different now, having been non-resident for Canada for 10 years, and spent time with people from all over the world, all over the planet. So it's more. I feel more like a global citizen now than when I left. Yeah. But there's good things to be done everywhere and anywhere. It's not a matter of you don't have to go away to find something that's really special, of course. So this is so there's that surrender.
A few more questions I want to ask you, Cress. One is thinking about the points that I like to make in my talk. The third one that I say is, you know, persistence. What is it that makes you stick with it? I mean, and you've been speaking about that this whole time, about just the joy of opening yourself up to new places, new experiences, new people, new cultures. And the last thing I wanted to ask you is, inevitably there are setbacks. There are things which, you know, initially can be perceived as, I don't know if insurmountable is the right word, but definitely things that make you pause and think, well, gee, that didn't unfold the way I thought, and look like setbacks or even huge steps backward, and then in hindsight turn out to be real gifts that moved you forward in a way that a straight line would not have. Is there anything in particular that comes to mind when I say that? Aside from...
As a setback?
What's that?
Sure. I mean, in a way, South Africa was a setback. That didn't work out. Working in the Middle East, that didn't work out.
Not speaking...
Istanbul.
Not speaking Turkish.
Pardon? Yes, exactly. But something else happened. And I ended up working in China that I probably, doing work there I probably wouldn't have done if I had worked out in Turkey. And I really got a lot of working in China. So it's, of course, it seems trite to say it, but it's part of an adventure. There are things that go well, and there are things that go well, not so well. But if I haven't learned anything in this last 10 years, it's that things will work out. Things will work out. In the long run, it's just the way it goes. And when we're in the middle of it, we want to know, we want to be certain, we want to know it's the right direction, and we want to be, confident this is not wasted time, and that's just not the way it works. It's nonsense. It's just us wanting to be different.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think any human being can ever turn that off. I think it would exist, but I think what we can do is we can culture sort of a concurrent voice that says, okay, take a breath, don't whine so much, relax, have another glass of wine and take a breath.
Yeah.
And wait, something will happen.
And again, I come back to that wonderful image that you shared of your first cross-Atlantic passage where you, stopped being afraid of being afraid. I keep hearing that theme come back. That has served you very well. So on that note, would you like tell people a little bit about your talk, what it is that you talk about.
My Sales 7 Cs talks?
Yeah.
Well, like time for my commercial.
Yeah, exactly. You've earned it, I think.
Well, so one of the things that's was just a huge satisfaction is writing a book. Our Brian Fraser, he encouraged me to write a book, and we spent a lot of time talking, and the feedback, the advice I got was, if you want to write, write. And write whatever it is you want to write when you want to write it, and just keep writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And I did that all the way across the South Pacific. And as I was saying in the workshop on Saturday, the topic that I was curious about was, so what does it take to make the choice to go after the things that you are here on the planet to do, the thing that you're passionate about, the things that are important to us. We want not to live our lives doing the expedient thing or the convenient thing or the practical thing, because our lives are short and we only get to do it once. So we really will be much happier if we're on the hunt, looking for what it is we're here to do and trying to bring it into the world. So we were really curious how many people were telling us when we were getting ready to go sailing that, gosh, I wish you could do what you're doing. And I know they don't like sailing. I know that. But what they were saying, so many of them, we wish we could be doing what we want to be doing rather than something else. And I got really curious about why that would be. So many people in our modern, wealthy Western world where we've got everything: food, clothing, safety, security, education, that we don't do that as often as we really could be doing it. So what gets between us and making the choice to really make our lives about this exploration of finding out who we are and bringing our gifts into the world? So that was a book that emerged out of all those bits and pieces that I had ponied together sailing across the South Pacific. And so my book is, for those of you that are fans of Alan Persig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the book that emerged for me was sort of a narrative of sailing across the South Pacific, but it was really a philosophical reflection about, so what can we do in our lives to prepare ourselves so that we can actually make the choice to go after what's important to us. Because once we make the choice to do it, it's like sailing around the world. It just sort of unfolds like an accident once you get off the dock, right?
Yeah.
But it's getting off the dock that's hard for us, because we've got to step into uncertainty and risk and courage. So that's what the 7 C's are about. One of the 7 C's is courage, and that was the workshop we did on Saturday. But there's also a workshop on course, C for course, which is about dreaming the dream, holding the vision. There's a 7 C's course on capacity, which is about building physical, emotional, spiritual, mental capacity, and making that a part of our intention and developing the right sort of habits so that we build that platform to live our lives from. So that would be C for capacity. There's a C for companions. It's about being intentional, about having people in our lives that support us in our journey, that are an advocate for us and we in turn for them. And it's equally about moving away from people in our lives that are not supporting our life journey. C for compassion for ourselves and for others. So that sort of place of going, oh me, I really am imperfect after all. Oh well, I'll just keep going, and I'll hold the same place for others.
Well, that's it. Right.
Captaincy. Captaincy. The notion of being fully responsible for everything. I mean, when we live our lives from a place of letting other things take control of us, they take us. So if we're like the captain of our own lives, the way a captain commands a ship, we are responsible for everything, no matter what happens. We always have a choice to be responsible. So when we can live our lives from that stance of total self-responsibility, this is my life and I make all my choices for myself, and I need to take responsibility that way. And we create possibility making choices. So those are the 7 C's. That's what the book's about. That's what the workshops are about. Each one of them is a huge conversation.
Yeah.
You know, in a day, we only get started.
Yeah.
But
is your book, is a link to your book available on your site? Okay. Yeah.
There is for sale on Amazon. I have ebook and a paper print. I've got about I printed a self-published, so I have it available. Like you can.
So that's the next thing I want to do. I want people to know how they can reach you. CresswellWalker.com is your site. And
yes, and on that website, that's sort of the landing website. There's my coaching site there, CoachingWorks, intl.com, which is my corporate site, and my Sales 7 C's site.
Okay, and if people wanted your book, they would be able to get the book on all of those sites, on one of those sites. Should I include a link to Amazon? What would be the best thing for people to do if they wanted to get the book? Okay.
You can go to Amazon. You can type in the title.
Okay.
And it comes up for sale. Or you can contact me, send me an email, and I'll ship it to you.
So what I would like you to do then, Chris, is to please send me all the sites that you want to have included, that you want me to let people know about. And when I post this recording, all of those links will be underneath, including the link, the Amazon link. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'm remembering now. I already
no, that's fine. That's fine. And I just want to acknowledge Brian and Meryl for being with us for the whole hour. Thank you both very much for being a part of this conversation. I've certainly had a wonderful time. For those of you who joined us somewhere in flight or somewhere in mid-sail, it's been my great pleasure to be chatting with Cresswell Walker, who just came back from a 10-year adventure sailing and working around the world with his partner, Irene. And I will be including some information about how you can connect with and perhaps be coached by Cress at CresswellWalker.com. And there are some other sites he will give me as well, and I will include them with the rebroadcast of this conversation. So yeah, thanks, Chris. I've just enjoyed this immensely, and I hope that in whatever way this video will go out and sail around the world in its own way and serve people in one more way to let people know about you.
Well, bless your heart for creating the space for me, Nathan. I really made it easy and fun.
My great pleasure. It was my pleasure to feel like I was on board with you for an hour. I definitely had
like you are.
Some vicarious moments with you. In some small ways, I have experienced, not to the magnitude you have, but I too have a great love of the water and the sea. So I look forward to sailing with you. How about that? We'll have to sail together. I would absolutely love that.
Right.
Good.
Bring us down in
the perpetual cry of the Vancouverite. Soon. August. No, soon. All right. Thank you, Chris. So, this will be, as soon as I get that information from you sometime this evening, I'll post that, and then people will be able to get it, and I will send you a link so you'll have it for your sites, and I'll have it on mine as well. So, blessings to you, good sir. All right.
Okay, I'll get.
And thank you all for watching. My great pleasure.
Bye.